Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when the road ahead seems impossibly long, when the struggles we face feel too great to bear, and when the weight of doubt and despair threatens to overwhelm our hearts. In those times when the path is unclear, it is easy to lose sight of the promise of hope. Yet in the depths of our hardship, we are reminded of a simple yet profound truth: there is always hope. In every trial, no matter how dire, there is always a reason to press on, to endure, and to trust that brighter days are ahead. We all know that life is filled with challenges, moments when we find ourselves standing at the foot of a mountain that seems insurmountable. We face illness, loss, disappointment, and heartbreak. The world around us often seems full of confusion and chaos, and it can feel like the darkness might never lift. But it is in these very moments that we must hold firm to a powerful truth: God is with us and He is faithful. Even when we cannot see the way forward, we can trust that His promises never fail. When you feel like you are at the end of your rope, when your strength is gone, remember this: God never abandons His children. He is there in the midst of your pain, offering comfort, strength, and the grace to keep going. His love is unwavering and His presence is constant. There is no valley too deep, no storm too fierce, no burden too heavy for Him to bear. And even in the darkest moments, He is working behind the scenes, preparing a way, making a way where there seems to be no way. In times of trouble, we often wonder why we face such hardships. Why must we endure such suffering? Why must we experience pain, sorrow, and heartache? But the answer lies not in the pain itself, but in what God is doing through the pain. He uses our struggles to shape us, to refine us, to draw us closer to Him. It is through the fire of adversity that our faith is tested, and it is in those moments that we find the strength to grow and to persevere. God does not promise us a life free from pain or difficulty. In fact, He tells us that in this world we will face tribulation. But He also promises that He will never leave us and that He will give us the strength to endure. He tells us that those who hope in Him will renew their strength, that they will soar on wings like eagles, run and not grow weary, walk and not be faint. This is a promise that we can hold on to with all our hearts, for it is a promise that is as true today as it was when it was first spoken. It is easy to lose hope when we are overwhelmed by life's difficulties. But hope is not something that we must muster up within ourselves. It is not a feeling that comes and goes based on our circumstances. True hope is rooted in the unwavering faithfulness of God. It is a hope that is founded on the unchanging truth that He is good, that He loves us, and that He will see us through every trial. When we choose to place our hope in God, we are choosing to trust in His timing, His wisdom, and His plan for our lives. We are choosing to believe that He is working all things together for our good, even when we cannot understand what is happening. This kind of hope is not dependent on our circumstances, but on the character of God. It is the kind of hope that allows us to stand firm, even in the face of adversity, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. Faith is the foundation of this hope. Faith is not just believing in God's existence. It is trusting in His goodness, His power, and His love. It is placing our complete confidence in Him, knowing that He is able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine. Faith is what enables us to move forward when we cannot see the way ahead. It is what empowers us to take the next step, even when we feel like we can't go on. The journey of faith is not always easy. It requires perseverance, patience, and a willingness to trust even when the road is unclear. But as we walk by faith, we discover something incredible. God's faithfulness is not just a promise, it is a reality. He is always there, always working, always leading us to the place where He wants us to be. So my friends, never give up. When you feel like you cannot go on, remember that God is with you. When you are tempted to lose heart, remember that He is faithful. When you feel weary and worn, remember that His strength is made perfect in your weakness. You are not alone in your struggles. You are not without hope. God is with you and He will see you through. There is nothing that can separate you from His love. not your failures, not your fears, not your circumstances. His love is constant, unchanging, and ever present. And because of that love, you can face tomorrow with hope and courage, knowing that you are never without help. So take heart. Hold on to your faith. Keep moving forward, step by step, trusting that God will provide the strength you need. There is no obstacle that can defeat you, no challenge that can overpower you, because the one who is with you is greater than anything this world can throw your way. Never give up, my friends, for with God all things are possible. In moments of struggle and hardship, it often feels as though we are walking through a wilderness alone and without direction. The weight of life's challenges can be overwhelming, and when it seems like hope is slipping away, it's easy to feel abandoned. But in these very moments of distress, we must remember that God's presence is not only a comfort, but a promise. He is with us even when we cannot see Him or feel His presence in the way we would like. His assurance remains true. He is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. It is in the midst of our darkest times that God draws closest to us, offering His peace, His strength, and His love. When we face difficulties, whether they be physical, emotional, or spiritual, it's natural to wonder where God is. Why does it seem like we are struggling alone? Yet the truth is that God's presence is constant, even when we do not immediately sense it. His word reassures us that He will never leave us or forsake us, no matter how deep the valley of despair or how fierce the storm. We might not always feel God's presence in a tangible way, but that does not change the reality of His nearness. God's presence in our struggles is not about the absence of pain, rather it's about His presence in the midst of it. He does not promise a life free from suffering, but He does promise to walk alongside us through every trial. We are never abandoned in our pain. In fact, God often meets us in our struggles in ways that bring deeper understanding, greater peace, and a more profound trust in Him. It is through the dark nights of the soul that our faith can be tested and strengthened, for in those moments we learn to rely not on our own strength, but on God's. God is not a distant, uninvolved figure who watches from afar as we suffer. He enters into our pain, walking with us, feeling with us, and carrying us when we cannot take another step. His presence becomes our refuge, our safe place in the storm. He is the source of our strength when we are too weak to continue, and He offers His grace to sustain us when we are worn and weary. The beauty of His presence is that it does not depend on the absence of pain, but on the certainty that He is with us through every moment. When we face struggles, we are often tempted to focus solely on the pain, to look only at the circumstances that seem to be closing in around us. But in those moments, we are called to look beyond the struggle and to turn our hearts toward God. When we seek Him, He draws near. Even when we do not have the words to express our pain or confusion, He understands. His presence is not only comforting but transformative, allowing us to see our situations through His eyes and giving us the strength to press on. In the midst of suffering, His love is a constant reminder that we are not alone and that He will never let us go. In life, it's often during our most difficult moments that we question the purpose behind the pain we experience. When the weight of loss, illness, or hardship presses in on us, it's natural to wonder why we must endure such suffering. But in the midst of these challenges, God is not absent. He is present, actively working in ways that are often beyond our understanding. The truth is that God uses our struggles to refine us, to mold us, and to draw us closer to Him. The pain we endure is not meaningless or without purpose. Rather, it serves a higher divine purpose that works for our good and His glory. God's purpose in allowing suffering is not about punishment or abandonment, but about growth. Just as gold must be refined by fire to be purified, so too must our faith be tested and strengthened through the trials we face. When we go through hard times, our faith is often tested to its core. It is in these moments of difficulty that we find out where our true trust lies, not in our own strength, resources, or abilities, but in God's power and sovereignty. These struggles serve as opportunities for us to lean more deeply on Him, to trust that He is using each trial to shape us into the people He has called us to be. The pain and hardship we endure are also instruments in the hands of a loving Father who is committed to our transformation. God knows that through our suffering we learn endurance, perseverance, and resilience. These qualities cannot be developed without struggle. In fact, it's often through hardship that we are reminded of our dependence on God. When things are easy, we might become complacent or self-reliant, but it's when life becomes difficult that we truly learn the value of humility and trust. God uses our weaknesses to show us His strength, and through that process we become more aligned with His will for our lives. Moreover, suffering serves as a means of refinement. Just as a sculptor chisels away at a block of marble to reveal a masterpiece, God uses life's hardships to chip away at the parts of us that do not reflect His character. He molds our hearts to become more compassionate, more patient, and more loving. Through our struggles, we are often forced to confront our own shortcomings, our selfishness, impatience, and pride, and God uses these opportunities to refine us, making us more like Him. Another crucial aspect of God's use of pain is that it draws us closer to Him. When life is easy, it's easy to drift away from dependence on God, but when we face difficulties, we often find ourselves reaching out to Him more fervently. Our struggles have a way of softening our hearts, making us more aware of our need for God's presence in our lives. We begin to realize that we cannot face the challenges of life alone, and we come to understand more deeply than ever that we need His grace, wisdom, and strength to carry us through. It is in the midst of suffering that we often experience the greatest intimacy with God as He comforts us, strengthens us, and walks with us through the valley. God never wastes our pain. Though we may not see it at the time, every hardship has a purpose in His plan for our lives. Whether He is refining our character, teaching us humility, or drawing us closer to Him, He is always working behind the scenes for our ultimate good. Our suffering is never in vain as a tool in His hands to bring about transformation, growth, and a deeper connection with the Creator. While it's difficult to understand in the midst of our pain, the reality is that God's ways are higher than our ways, and He sees the full picture, working all things together for our good. Hope is a powerful force, one that can anchor us through the fierce storms of life. But true hope is not based on what we can see or feel in the moment. It is rooted in the unshakable faithfulness of God. Too often we place our hope in temporary things, our circumstances, our health, our relationships, or even our own abilities. When these things change or fail us, we can easily lose hope, finding ourselves adrift in a sea of uncertainty. However, genuine hope is founded on something far more reliable, the character of God. His faithfulness does not falter, His promises are true, and His love never changes. This is the foundation upon which our hope stands. Hope that is grounded in God's faithfulness transcends any momentary setback or disappointment. It is not dependent on the outcome of our immediate circumstances, but on the unchanging truth that God is always with us and that He will fulfill His promises. His word assures us that He is working all things together for the good of those who love Him, even when we cannot see how things will turn out. While the world might offer hope that is fleeting or superficial, the hope we have in God is eternal, steadfast, and unwavering. It is not a wish or a vague feeling that things will somehow get better. It is a confident expectation based on the reality that God is in control, that He is good, and that He will never leave us. In the midst of suffering or uncertainty, it can be easy to focus on what we lack or what seems broken in our lives. We might look around and see chaos, pain, or confusion and wonder where hope can be found. But true hope doesn't ignore the reality of our struggles. Rather, it acknowledges them and yet chooses to place trust in God's ability to work through them. Hope in God is not a denial of difficulty, but rather a declaration that we trust in His power to bring beauty from the ashes, purpose from the pain, and peace in the midst of turmoil. It's a belief that no matter how bleak the situation may appear, God is still sovereign, still working, and still capable of transforming our lives in ways we cannot yet comprehend. When we hope in God, we are also reminded that our ultimate hope is not in this world, While God promises to be with us and to help us through life's trials, He also promises us something greater, an eternal hope that transcends the temporal troubles of this life. Our hope is not confined to the circumstances of today. It is rooted in the future promise of eternal life with Him. This hope gives us perspective, reminding us that even when life is hard, there is something far greater waiting for us. It enables us to endure hardship with a sense of purpose, knowing that our struggles are temporary, but the glory that awaits us is eternal. Hope in God also enables us to be lights to others in a world that is often filled with hopelessness and despair. Those who place their hope in God stand as a testimony to His faithfulness. When we trust in God's promises, we display a hope that is contagious, a hope that others can see and be drawn to. Our hope becomes a source of encouragement to those around us, pointing them to the one who is the true source of lasting hope. Hope rooted in the faithfulness of God gives us the strength to keep going, even when the road ahead seems unclear. It anchors our hearts in the midst of uncertainty, assuring us that no matter what comes our way, God is faithful and His promises stand firm. Faith is the bedrock of hope. It is the unseen thread that connects our hearts to God, and it is the strength that allows us to persevere even when the road ahead seems uncertain. Faith is not just a mental acknowledgement of God's existence. It is a deep, unshakable trust in His character, His goodness, and His power. Faith allows us to place our lives in His hands even when the future feels uncertain or when we are faced with trials that seem insurmountable. It is through faith that we are able to look beyond our immediate circumstances and see the greater picture that God is painting for our lives. When we talk about faith, it's important to remember that it's not a passive belief, but an active living trust. Faith is something we exercise in the small moments and the big moments alike. It's not just about believing in God when everything is going well, but about trusting in Him when everything seems to be falling apart. It's about walking forward even when we don't have all the answers, knowing that God is leading us step by step even when we can't see the whole path. This kind of faith is not about having all the answers or understanding every part of God's plan. It's about trusting that He is good and that He is in control, even when we don't have all the details. Faith is what enables us to step out of our comfort zones and face the unknown with courage. It's easy to trust when we can see the way forward clearly, but true faith shines brightest when the way is unclear. It's in these moments of uncertainty that faith becomes a lifeline, pulling us toward God and helping us stand firm, even when the winds of doubt blow fiercely around us. Faith allows us to take the next step, even when we cannot see what lies ahead, knowing that God is holding us steady. Faith also enables us to trust in God's timing, even when it doesn't align with our own. We live in a world that demands immediate results and quick fixes, but God's timing often works in a way that is different from our expectations. Faith teaches us to trust that God's timing is perfect, even when we're waiting for answers or for relief from our struggles. It's in the waiting that our faith is refined and strengthened. God uses these seasons of waiting to teach us patience, to deepen our dependence on Him, and to grow our trust in His sovereign plan. Furthermore, faith is the lens through which we are able to see the world and our circumstances differently. When we walk by faith, we no longer view life through a lens of fear or anxiety, but through the assurance that God is with us and for us. Faith changes our perspective, helping us to see beyond the temporary struggles of this world to the eternal hope that awaits us. It allows us to focus on God's promises rather than on our problems. When we see life through the eyes of faith, we understand that our struggles are not in vain. They are opportunities for growth, for refining our character, and for drawing closer to God. Faith is not always easy. It requires us to let go of our need for control and to trust God with our lives, even when the outcome is uncertain. But it is through faith that we discover the depth of God's love, the richness of His grace, and the power of His presence in our lives. It is through faith that we find the strength to endure, the courage to face each day, and the hope to press forward, knowing that God is faithful and will see us through. When we face challenges and obstacles in life, it's easy to become overwhelmed and feel like giving up. The road may seem too long, the weight too heavy, and the struggle too great to bear. But in these moments, it is essential to remember that we do not face life's difficulties alone. We are never left to endure our challenges in our own strength. God, in His infinite wisdom and love, provides us with the strength we need to persevere, even when we feel weak. His strength is not only a gift, but a reminder that we do not have to rely on our own limited resources, but can lean on His power, which is limitless. Perseverance, particularly in times of difficulty, is not about grit or sheer determination alone. It is about relying on God's strength to sustain us when we feel like we can't take another step. God knows that we are frail, that we are prone to weariness and doubt. That is why He promises to provide the strength we need in our weakest moments. The Apostle Paul, in his own struggles, experienced God's sustaining grace in ways that were both humbling and empowering. He learned that in his weakness, God's power was made perfect. It is through our weakness that we often experience the greatest strength as He carries us through situations that would otherwise be impossible to navigate on our own. When we face difficult times, it is easy to become consumed by fear, doubt, and discouragement. We might feel like the mountain before us is too high to climb or the storm too fierce to weather. But it is precisely in these moments that God's strength becomes our anchor. It's in these times that invites us to rest in Him, to surrender our fears and anxieties, and assist in His ability to carry us through. God doesn't promise that the storm will instantly cease or that the road ahead will be smooth. But He does promise that He will walk with us every step of the way. He will give us the strength to face each day one moment at a time. Perseverance in faith is also about understanding that God is using our struggles to refine us. Just as a muscle grows stronger through resistance, so does our faith grow stronger through challenges. We may not always understand why we face particular trials, but we can trust that God is using them to shape us into the people He wants us to be. Our trials are not meant to break us, but to build us up, to make us more resilient, more compassionate, and more like Christ. When we lean on God's strength, we are being molded into vessels that can better reflect His glory and goodness. As we press forward, trusting in God's strength, we also learn to rely on His timing. It's easy to become discouraged when things don't happen as quickly as we want, but God's timing is always perfect. In the moments when we feel like giving up, we must remember that God's plan is greater than our own, and His timing will always be the right timing. Sometimes the strength we need is not just physical or emotional, but the patience to wait on God's perfect plan to unfold. When we find ourselves at the end of our strength, we are reminded that God's power is made perfect in our weakness. It is in these moments that we experience the reality that we are not alone, that God is with us, empowering us, lifting us, and giving us the courage to keep going. With His strength, we can overcome any obstacle, endure any hardship, and press on toward the goal, no matter how difficult the journey may seem. God's strength is a constant and reliable source of hope, sustaining us through every challenge we face. As we navigate the ups and downs of life, we are bound to face trials that test our resilience, challenge our faith, and sometimes leave us questioning how much more we can endure. Yet, in these moments of difficulty, we are reminded of a truth that has sustained countless individuals throughout history. We are never alone. Even in our darkest moments, we have the presence of God with us, offering strength, hope, and purpose through every struggle. The challenges we face are not meaningless. They are opportunities for growth, refinement, and deeper connection with God. It is in the fire of adversity that our faith is tested and strengthened, and through it we learn to rely not on our own abilities, but on the unchanging power of God. When we place our hope in Him, we acknowledge that our circumstances do not define our future. He does. The storms of life may rage, but the foundation of our faith and hope is secure in God's promises. Hope, when anchored in God's faithfulness, is a steadying force. It helps us see beyond the immediate pain and uncertainty and look toward the future with confidence. It doesn't promise that the journey will be easy, but it assures us that we are not walking it alone. God's presence is a constant source of comfort and strength, and His promises never fail. When our hearts are weighed down with despair, we can remember that our hope is not based on fleeting circumstances, but on a God who is unchanging and always at work for our good. Faith is the key to unlocking that hope. It is through faith that we learn to trust in God's goodness even when we cannot see the way forward. It is faith that enables us to persevere when the road seems long and the challenge is insurmountable. And it is through faith that we are reminded that God's plans for us are greater than anything we can imagine. Our faith is not something that rests on our ability to understand everything, but rather on the trust that God knows what is best for us and will guide us every step of the way. Perseverance, especially in times of hardship, is not a matter of enduring on our own strength, but leaning on God's. It is through His strength that we are empowered to face challenges we never thought we could overcome. His strength is perfect in our weakness. And in those moments when we feel like we have nothing left to give, He is there to carry us through. We are